Mass Effect 1 is, in my opinion, the best Mass Effect game ever made, and it's not even close. I love the story, the villains, and the locations that to this day almost no other games have matched. But maybe the single most intriguing factor about this timeless classic is the beautiful world which it introduced us to. Not a world full of realistic graphics and ray tracing, but one that instead sought to capture our hearts and souls, crafting places and memories that will forever stand the test of time, like Sovereign's greatest villain speech ever in a game, or the final battle at the Citadel. There's a distinct style and essence that only the Mass Effect series envelops, and the first installment was the one that really nailed it. There are cold and brooding planets full of top secret research like Noveria and Pharos, and others that feel more like a paradise light years away from home, a la Virmire. But through it all is a distinct sense of a high-tech world fashioned from science and ingenuity, full of places like the Citadel characterized by blindingly white and pristine color hues. And oftentimes sci-fi tries to feel more grounded in a way, providing locations that almost look like something out of the modern day, but with a few enhancements. But Mass Effect 1 isn't like that. It's unapologetically advanced. Everything you go to feels futuristic in a good way. And because of how foreign many places can feel, it's all the more interesting really diving into every location and the lore behind it. Even with the now dated graphics and gameplay, often combined with muted color tones reminiscent of games of the Xbox 360 era, there still is so much beauty that can be extracted from the entire ensemble. And that's because one of my favorite things about some old games is that they can light our imaginations even more than newer titles, because where they lack in believability, our brains can fill in the gaps. And what better place to do that than an entire universe that is begging to be explored with dozens of new alien races and fascinating lore to really dig through. There's a galaxy map in the game where you can set your sights on every planet and asteroid in the Milky Way. And even for the ones you can't travel to, just reading into the deep lore and science behind every location never gets old. Part of having a world worth getting lost in is making it feel like a real place with a real history to it that you get rewarded for digging into. And on top of that, there's also tons of desolate barren rocks that you can land on that really make the universe feel expansive. Because while moments like this can be boring and tedious after some time, it adds to the beauty and wonder of this galaxy and world that just keeps on giving the more you give to it. And honestly, there really is just something about that 80s simplistic Art Deco style in some of the interiors and the creepy yet hauntingly beautiful dread that some of the scenes evoke that add to the whole experience. Whether it be underground neon lit bars and clubs, or massive sprawling valleys that stretch into the distance that you can drive through, all barred by invisible walls, there's a magic to this game and its world that is just so unique to the time it was made in and the style of RPGs at that period. As I said, I'm the type of person that loves newer games and updated graphics and just having the best of the best. But sometimes you have to sit back and appreciate just how beautiful some of the older stuff was in its own way too. And I think Mass Effect 1 is a prime candidate for making a sci-fi world that really catches not only your eyes, but your soul. Ghost of Tsushima is one of the most beautiful game worlds of all time. Whether it's the vibrant colors in every scene, or how the trees sway in the hands of the wind as they beckon the player towards each and every goal. There's a tranquility and stillness that this game understands that often is left void in other titles. And that's because Ghost of Tsushima is all about the journey, not the destination. Taking place during the Mongols' invasion and conquest of Japan, the setting is ripe with political intrigue and sets the tone of the entire epic storyline. But the real shining achievement here is just how cinematic the world really is. Every second you play feels like a blockbuster movie, moving from scenes in scenic and bombastic locations like Yamabuashi's Peak and the Golden Forest, to more somber and evocative set dressing a la the Spirit Grove Cemetery or the Drowned Man's Shore. And each of these unmistakable zones is home to a very unique feeling all to its own. Some are black and white, some have gusting winds that sway the blooming blossom trees with petals cascading through the air, and others provide endless fields of rice ripe for the picking. But no matter where you go in game, you never lose a complete and utter sense of imagination, a pure beauty brought to life on screen. It's one of those games where you simply lose track of time as you play, because you really do get fully immersed into the world and become so overwhelmed by it. Even during many of the combat sections, especially with some of the bosses, watching as the camera pans out and the scene comes to life as you shift your feet through mounds of leaves never gets old. And even just the way in which the world is designed and how you travel through it is all constructed in the most cinematic way possible. You truly become a samurai warrior in a mystical place of dreams almost. And you see, the beauty of this world and its setting is the main character of the game, and feudal Japan comes to life because of how engrossing every second is. More than almost any other games out there, Ghost of Tsushima is so vehemently focused on beauty and presentation. Oftentimes, entire scenes revolve around nothing more than the splash of color of one massive tree in an otherwise desolate place, or a sea of vibrant yellow across the ground that brings so much life to the experience and separates this world from all the other generic ones out there in games. And because of how impactful so many of the moments are, it tells a story all to itself. The tenets of a great samurai, honor, respect, duty, and diligence are all expressed without even a word needing to be uttered. It's the perfect example of how important a setting and how it is crafted can be to telling stories in games, because the worlds we fall in love with oftentimes are the ones that have a distinct sense of beauty all to themselves, not the ones that simply serve as a playground to nothing more than an assortment of game mechanics. Some of the most powerful moments in games stem from this title right here, and that's because beauty in games is such an underrated thing. Oftentimes we focus so much more on how a game plays or how the narrative is structured, whether or not there are bugs or if the graphics look just right. But I think the key to so much great art isn't necessarily all that, but rather something more. How a game makes you feel. Because if a game can make you feel something, then it has the chance to last with you for a lifetime, not just for as long as you play. And sometimes all you need for a sense like that is a world full of such beauty and awe that it's hard to look away, one that sweeps you off your feet and beckons you in. But Ghost of Tsushima isn't the only one. There's a lot more where that came from. Red Dead Redemption 2 for many people is the greatest game ever made, and that's for good reason. It has amazing writing and narrative beats, characters that will make you cry, and a setting that feels more reactive than any game ever made to date. But for a lot of us, the best part of this game is something a lot more simple: the world and the beauty that it so perfectly captures. From the Baroque city streets of St. Denis to the desert wastelands of New Austin, or even the woodlands full of tall trees and swamps or mountain ranges covered in snow. Throughout the runtime of Red Dead 2, there's not a single moment you can find, not a single frame, not one time that you couldn't pause, take a screenshot, and marvel at the beauty in front of you. And that's because there's a special feeling you get in this game, even just walking around, where every distance in front of you is covered in serene wilderness. Bears stalk their prey in the mask of the woods, alligators comb the depths of waters and swamps, and the scariest monsters of all, humans, react so realistically and believably to situations that it's hard not to fall instantly in love with this world's trance. There's so many times when playing this game where you will be galloping your horse across a massive valley and just have to stop to take it all in, as a sunset starts to swallow the sky whole and dawn begins to set in, as a campfire rages in the distance and the howls of wolves can be heard in a canyon miles off, or the sounds of your footsteps as they clap through the dirt beneath your feet and the moon illuminates your travels at night. There's a special sort of craftsmanship in the world on offer here, and even though I personally find it so tedious to play at times because of how slow and methodical it is, I can't deny that it really just adds to the beauty of this world. And on top of this, there's so many times in this game that the use of cinematography and lighting come to life and transform otherwise ordinary scenes into old Western style Tarantino-esque adventure, like robbing a train barreling through the deep woods, or the infamous shootout at the manor. But throughout it all, the shining star continues to be the world, and just how elegantly crafted it all is. The landscape, like snow, snow will deform under your feet as you traverse it, and the animals you shoot will litter blood throughout the environment like a crime scene. There really is just a movement to this world that feels so real, and because of that, it's one of the most immersive out there. And even now, years after the game's initial release, it still continues to be one of the greatest looking of all time, with vistas and environments that have yet to be matched. I mean, truly, look at some of these scenes. They go beyond even what words could describe, and instead capture a deeper sense of beauty within all of us that games seldom manage to understand, even many of the greats. Sometimes the best part of a game isn't the fun combat or the twists and turns in a story, but rather just those slower moments. Those moments where you forego all the action and instead gaze out into the world in front of you and watch as the sky turns black, the trees begin to wobble in the wind, and the animals' eyes glow with anticipation. Too often in games we focus on gameplay and story that often we forget just how important and even more interestingly, how impactful amazing graphics and art design can really be. Because at the end of the day, games are about making us get lost in another world, and maybe more than any other games out there, Red Dead Redemption 2 focuses solely on this goal of crafting a world so true, so real, and so raw that simply by being in it, you can't help but to be captured by its spell. Without a doubt, one of the most beautiful game worlds of all time. Shadow of the Colossus is a cult classic that many people nowadays might not even know about. It was originally released in 2005 and at the time was beloved for the experience it provided unlike anything else out there. And to this day, that experience still remains so powerful. And that's because of the world and the beauty it managed to capture at such a weird moment in time. In the game, you traverse massive and open landscapes that go on for miles and simply meander in any direction towards your goal. And along the way, you are met with titans of immense scale that can be fought by climbing their entire bodies to reach weak points and deal fatal damage. Not only is it a cool concept for a game, but also it lends itself to so many astounding set pieces where you'll find yourself feeling what feels like titans in a massive canyon. This was before games were really focused on bombastic set pieces like this. And even more impressively, Shadows of the Colossus does it in real time. But even for all the amazing fights, still to this day, the most memorable thing about the game is the world and its environments. Walking through an open field of grass and peering off into the distance to see armies of waterfalls and cliffs accompanied by ancient structures of a civilization long destroyed. There's a strange sense of calmness and coldness you get when playing this game, and because of the time period it was constructed in, it still has that eerie gray glow that was a staple of games at the time, courtesy of Gears of War. But while in most games I hate this look as it just feels washed out and bland, for some reason here in Shadow of the Colossus, it fits perfectly. It adds a sense of drabness to the world that elevates its intrigue, where otherwise it would probably come off as too childish and insubstantial. And because of that, a world that should be bland actually has so much life to it. Even at moments where you are traversing a wide open desert, and almost everything on your screen is sand with less than stellar physics reactions, it still feels like home for some reason. It's one of those game worlds that just happens to hit an odd sense of calmness that puts you at ease, and it makes every combat encounter that much more epic because of how serene the other moments in the game world are. Later into the game too, you will find many mega structures and fortresses that lay dormant yet still tell a story all to their own. And finding these scattered across such a desolate wasteland that stretches for miles once again just adds to the oddities of this world that bring it all together. And finally, at the forefront of it all is the sounds and music. Listening to the hooves of your horse clap against the ground, or wind as it howls across the canyons in-game. The world constantly feels like it's almost in slow motion, and almost brings you into a trance that no other game in history matches. At so many points when playing this game, you will almost feel like a song should be starting to play like it would in any other title, but the developers had the restraint here to instead let the world and its beauty speak for itself, allowing you to be completely smothered by its confidence. I'm usually a fan of newer games over old, somehow finding myself in the opposite predicament of most people who love older games and their nostalgia, but Shadows of the Colossus is one of those select few that, despite how many decades old it is now, continues to prove that real art is all about the feelings and design, not the best new engine.